Welcome to the first ever Futurephonic podcast. Alex here.
And Sam here.
And we're going to be taking your calls, giving audio advice. We're going to be chatting to artists. Today we're going to be chatting to Rinky Dink, who we caught up with at some airport hotel in Germany. He's going to be telling us, amongst other things, about when he got locked out of his hotel room naked in Brazil. And we're going to be giving away free shit. So, Sam, how's it going anyway over in
Australia? Yeah, really good, man, really good. It's pretty cold here, which is, a little bit annoying, but we're through the worst of the winter. And yeah, it's good. Looking forward to doing the first podcast. Pretty hyped.
That sort of typifies the polar opposite world that we live in. I'm sitting here sweating like a pig. And because so I'm in London, Sam's in Australia. I mean, it's been a great move for the business. It's really made stuff a lot easier. You know, I mean, when we lived 10 minutes away from each other here in London, you know, everything was real time. But now it's like a lot easier.
12-hour delay.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
I don't have to factor that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually thought about getting one of those clocks for like a second clock.
Yeah, dude.
I didn't even have a first clock. I didn't even have like a London clock, but I feel like that would just make everything Futurephonic just feel that extra bit more official. It's like a Melbourne clock.
So we'll just do a little bit of introduction for those that may not already know who we are. Alex, do you want to just tell us a little bit about your sort of history and your role in the company? Absolutely.
So I think most of you tuning in will be aware of who we are. But for anyone who doesn't know, so I'm Alex Story. I was writing psytrance with Liquid Records from 2005 before starting Sonic Species with Joe. Many of you know Joe. I started Sonic Species with him, gigged around, wrote the first album with him, and have since moved on to do other stuff, including Futurephonic, which is taking up pretty much all my time these days. And I've written all of our sample packs and synth patches, as well as produced our masterclass videos, where you probably recognize me from.
Absolutely. And I'm Sam Morgan, so I'm a producer, coach, and mentor. I used to live in London, born and raised in the UK, and I met Alex actually at a squat party in 2009, I think it was.
At a job
centre. Yeah, an old job centre, which was another story which we'll actually talk about a bit later. But I
definitely wasn't a current job centre.
No, definitely not. I was pretty heavily involved in the psytrance scene around that time for sort of 4 or 5 years, and then moved on to other things. I mainly produce lots of different stuff these days, but my main focus is really on educating around sort of music production and creative process. So that's us, I guess.
You forgot to add Ableton Guru to that.
Yeah.
Like a walking, talking encyclopedia of everything Ableton. So if you guys have any Ableton questions for our future episodes, lay them here. Sam's I don't know if you have life outside Ableton.
Not much of one, no.
But so speaking of questions, let's get straight into them.
Hello, Futurephonic. This is Bruno from Brazil. And my question is, finishing a track can be an endless process. So what advices can you share for someone who is in this phase? Cheers.
Thanks for the great question, Bruno. So my response is based on where you're at in your trajectory, if you will, as an artist. My first response when you ask that question is you need a deadline. And a great deadline, I think, is a label release. I've also been very clear when I've been talking in the past about making sure that you're ready for labels. So just a little, I actually worked with Bruno a few years ago.
Yeah.
And he's now started his Enablers project, making amazing stuff. They're releasing on labels. So my advice will pertain to your situation where you probably got an actual label release coming up. And my answer is intention. And that's become definitely the most important thing for me over the last few years as a creator of music. Is what how do I want the listener to feel? You could extend that onto how do I want the dance floor to dance? So the question you're probably asking yourself is, how do I know when it's finished? And the answer to that is, you have to be very frank with yourself. You have to be very honest with yourself, and you have to ask yourself, what do I want the listener to feel at every point in this track? So your track, you have a vision for a track which, for instance, starts slow and then pulls back the slingshot, and then maybe, after 64 bars kicks in, and it's that kind of a track. It's a slow builder, but which has a twist up its sleeve. Or you have the track which is just slamming straight full on, straight from the start. Whatever your vision is, that the track is finished when it makes you feel how you want your listener to feel. I would say that when I am in the dilemma of knowing that I've got good elements, but they're not necessarily in the right. Basically, I keep moving. I'll just move whole sections around. I'll just keep moving them around, like on the sort of table in front of me, until they just feel like they're sitting right. But it's you need to be able to listen back to your music and say, is this section, is this build up, is it, when it comes back in, is it making me feel how I want the listener to feel? Can you dance to it and truly feel that it's actually giving you the goods that you want? Because if it's not making you feel like that, then it's not going to make the dance floor feel like that. You might also be asking about mixed stuff. What I do, so I've got my main studio, but I've also got an old pair of Mackie HR824s in the living room. Totally different acoustic response, everything different. I also have my laptop and my partner's laptop. She has a MacBook Pro. I will listen to the mix on all of those systems, and you bet your ass I'm not going into that thinking, well, I hope this is perfect. I know already it's not. I know I'm going to have some points. There will be some points. I walk in there with a notepad, and if that notepad isn't full up, or if a page on that notepad isn't full up by the time I walk away, I'm not listening closely enough. And I just make lists. I just make very long lists. Percussion doesn't quite come in right at this part. Rides are too loud at this part. Listen to it on the iMac. Compared it to other tracks. All the other tracks are brighter. All the other tracks are duller. Organizing your thoughts in a readable format, and then I'll go back to the studio and I'll make the changes. Then I go back and I'll just keep doing that 3, 4, 5, 10, 11 times. Some of you, whoever, if you drive, a lot of you do the car stereo test. But it's just a case for me of making sure that the track has met my intentions and that the mix points are done. And I'm referencing with other tracks. I'll just close on saying that if I've got a deadline, I just tend to just give the goods. I deliver the goods. Last year I did a 48-hour video project where our video team that I was working with got given a brief to make from Friday night until Sunday night. You have to make a film, and I was given 40 hours to write an intricate piece of piano music. I probably would have spent 2 weeks doing that. If I'd been given 2 weeks, I would have spent all that time. But I had 48 hours, and I delivered it. It was finished. So if you can line up a label release, and if you got an actual deadline, then I think you'll find yourself just doing what it takes.
Absolutely, yeah. A couple of points that I would sort of expand on that with. In terms of the intention, absolutely. Ultimately what you're trying to do with your music is make people dance and make them feel something, give them some sort of emotional response. And one of the ways of sort of doing that is making sure that the track has a story of some description. It's like it has a start, it has a middle, it has an end. So you can sort of sit there and go, okay, is it doing those things? Do I feel like I've gone somewhere? Another really good thing which I do all the time is when I think I'm at a point where I've got what I want, or even if I'm not sure, I'll often just like turn the screen off, turn the lights off in the studio, just play the track and like pretend that I'm dancing to it. And there's something about that when you sort of separate yourself from being the actual guy that's sitting there twiddling all the knobs and pressing all the buttons. You just sort of intrinsically know if it's right. Like something will come in and you're like, oh, I just don't know that came in at the right time there, or like, and you feel it in a way that you wouldn't know if you're just sitting there looking at a screen.
Well, it's sensory deprivation. I mean,
Yeah.
that's classic sensory deprivation. You take the screen away, which I think is so important because you're taking the Lego, the Tetris in front of you away.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're not reading. Your music isn't an XY graph.
It's
now.
not a mental game; it's a physical game.
It's just sound coming out of speakers.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one that's always been really good for me is just bring someone else into the room.
Yes.
Bring someone else into the room, and as soon as you do that, you could have what you think is the best track ever. You bring someone else into the room, and in 2 seconds you're like, oh my god, this sounds absolutely terrible, or it sounds great. There's something about just having someone else there.
No, it always sucks. It always sucks when there's someone else there.
But yeah.
The best music I've ever made in my whole life sucked when someone was there.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
I take your point. I think that's a great point. What you just said about bringing someone into the room, because you turn into a different. You turn from the self-indulgent into someone who's presenting a pitch, like a sales pitch in front of a meeting.
Yeah,
you're squirming at all those bits. Like, what are you squirming at? What are you not happy with? Suddenly you get into a very reflective mode. You become the listener.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually get my partner I know in when I'm working music all the time, because as I'm playing it with the screen off, as you pointed out, always with the screen off, as I'm playing it, I start coming up with excuses. Okay, well, this bit isn't.
Yeah.
But maybe, and then I become.
This isn't quite done yet.
I become this. I become an analyst. I'm like, don't go away. But if I move this bit over here, that could be interesting. I can get 2 hours worth of work done in 10 minutes just because she's standing there.
Totally, dude. Yeah, 100%. And I think, so I think really what we're talking about here is there's your personal boundaries in terms of, deadline, how long have I got to do this, some sort of external pressure. And then there's the sort of litmus test of what it's actually designed to do. And the other one, of course, is if you think it's done, but you're not 100% sure, maybe what that last like 4 or 5%. And if you're at a point, like Alex said, where you're sort of close to releasing to labels, that probably means that you're getting fairly regular gigs. Just drop it in your set and see what the reaction is. See if it works. Does it play right?
If you're playing it in a set which has been down, if you're playing a whatever genre, speed, etc. set, and you drop this track in 3/4 of the way through, if that audience is dancing to all your other tracks, that they need to be dancing the same amount to your track. It's just not done until they're dancing the same or nearly the same. Okay, if you've been writing for 3 years and you play it against whatever big artist track, it might not do the same. I'm not saying wait another 20 years, but that is the ultimate test.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Hey man, my question is how to progress a bass line, a perfect bass line. I think there's no perfect bass line out there, but there are still some secrets, like how to make it wider without losing the bass, the low end. How to make a bass, a kick and bass collection from scratch. I think many people struggle with these because you can't find any tutorial on YouTube. All these tutorials are shitty. They say saw wave, cutoff envelope on the low pass filter. Wow. But I don't think that's a good bassline. There's more, some delay on the first note, 1 millisecond or something, or how to make the low cut. There's no video online where you can see these things.
Great question, Jean. The perfect bass line.
Your first point there is sort of about the widening aspect. So there's actually a lot of different ways that you can widen things, and I don't really want to go into too much detail about about those, because you can find tons and tons and tons of stuff about ways to widen. I mean, you can duplicate channels, pitch them, pan them left and right. There's specific widening plugins you can get. You can use Haas effect. There's a lot of different things, but the sort of core thing that you want to remember here is that you need to split your bass line up into different sections. So in order for it to be strong and solid, without losing the bass, as you say, you need to make sure that your low frequency, like really low subs, so everything from between, let's say, somewhere between 150 to 120 hertz down is completely mono, like absolutely mono, no widening, no phasing, no chorus, no delay, nothing like that at all. And you can go as wide as you want with things above that, but make sure that everything below sort of, it depends on the track and the key that you're in, but below sort of around 150 to 120 hertz down needs to be bang mono, absolutely no questions asked about that whatsoever. And then, everything on top of that, you can layer sort of as many times as you like. And actually in the Protoculture masterclass that we did, he went into sort of great detail about layering lots of sort of very wide stereo elements in his bass line and pulsey things. But the real low end stuff, as long as you keep that bang dead center, you can kind of get away with widening everything else on top. But yeah, as to the rest of it, Alex, why don't you jump on in there?
You know, there's a reason why this question has been posed since time immemorial, and it has endured the decades of psytrance production. There's a reason why people keep asking it. It's because there is no one single answer. There's no technique or device or certain synth which is like, oh, that's it. I find that the battle for bass, the battle for making great basses, is a battle which is quite spare of epiphanies. I've had very few sort of game changer moments. Progress is slow. Your ears develop really slowly. It's quite rare that I learn something or that someone shows me something and I'm like, oh, wow, like big game changer.
Completely.
And props for actually inquiring about making your own bass lines. You're just not a psytrance producer until you've been sitting under the table at 3 a.m. in the morning, feeling your desk, trying to interpret the bass reflections coming off of it, and then you walk over somewhere else, and then you come back 20 minutes later.
Putting your hands on the speaker cones.
We've all been there. And if you haven't, then go there. So let's think about one of the biggest problems that we have. Let's talk about a typical scenario. We spend half an hour really focusing on that one bass sound. You're sitting there in your synth, you're tweaking the envelopes, and you think you've got it. In fact, you're sure of it. And you come back and it's just not right. That's a problem. Here's a solution. Keep your ears fresh. So here's an exercise I want you to try. And keep going at it, and I guarantee you will walk away with a bass sound that you're happy with. So we're going to start by getting a reference track. And it's going to be a reference track that you can extract a kick and a bass out of. I'm not going to get into various methods of extracting kick and bass, but there's a lot of psytrance out there that has very bare open kick and bass sections. So they're ripe for extraction for the purpose of analysis, referencing, comparison, imitation. And once you've extracted the kick and bass from that reference track, I want you to rebuild their kick and bass in a 1-bar pattern. So you've just got 1 bar of their kick and bass. Now I want you to extend that loop to a 2nd bar. And in the 2nd bar, you're going to have just their kick. So you've got a 2-bar loop. The 1st bar is their kick and bass. The 2nd bar is just their kick. And in the 2nd bar, you're going to start building your bass in the same key. That's important. And so you're going to have a 2-bar loop. And it's 1 bar of their kick and bass, 1 bar of your kick and bass, 1 bar of their kick and bass, 1 bar of your kick and bass. And you're just going to loop that. And you're going to keep tweaking your bass until it sounds as close as possible to their bass. Now here's the key thing. Don't do this for more than 5 minutes. The way I think about it, every time you hit a minor victory, for instance, you think, I think I've got the click right. I know I haven't quite got the decay right, but I've got that click right. Stop.
Yeah.
and move on. So now we're going to get a second reference track. This is super important. We're going to get a second reference track, and we're going to set that up the same way we did the first. 1 bar of their kick and bass, 1 bar of their kick and your bass. And we're going to try and recreate that bass. And then when you've hit a minor victory there, maybe there's something about the hum which you think is quite similar. Move on. It's when we start being the hero, thinking, I've got this, and you're just running for glory now. You're like, I'm nailing this. I'm just going to spend 20 minutes on this. I've got it. Don't fall into that hole. When you've got that minor victory, we're going to make reference track C, and we're going to do it again. So now we've got 3 reference basses that we're trying to recreate. I say give your ears a challenge of trying to work in 3 different keys as well. So reference track C, we're going to work on that for a few minutes. Once you've hit a minor victory, and once you've started getting somewhere with reference track C, now go back to reference track A, and I bet you're going to hear something about the bass you were making in reference track A that you didn't hear 10 minutes previously when you were working on it.
Yeah.
That's because your ears are fresh now. And so here's the thing. Just keep moving constantly. Don't get stuck. And if you spend an hour just going A, B, C, A, B, C, moving, quickly, don't give your ears a chance to start fooling you. Move faster than your ears acclimatize. Here's another example. I'm a hobby photographer. I love shooting on film. And when I get my photos into Photoshop, I might have, say, 10 different photos I'm working on at the same time. And every 2 minutes, I just move to the next one, move to the next one, move to the next one. Because every time I come back to one I was working on 10 minutes ago, I always see something that I didn't quite see when I was working on it because I've got fresh eyes. So what I want you to do when you're making your kicks and basses is keep moving, keep your ears fresh. If you're trying to imitate the best produced stuff out there, it's a pretty high task. And it's impossible to know what that producer did in their studio when they were making it. But use your tools, use your ears, analyze. What happens visually when you put a high pass on a bass? How does that look on your analyzer? Does it make it look more like theirs? Sometimes you can actually see that they've put a high pass on that. And then you put yours on and you keep moving it. If you spend hour after hour trying to recreate it, did they put a high pass on? Did they put a low pass on? Is there compression? Can I see on my analyzer that there's a sort of really poppy transient there? Let's analyze the stereo. Is there a stereo bass layer? Can I use phase reversing to actually extract even more information out of the reference track? What happens when I put different distortions on it? And of course, the big one is EQing. It's not uncommon to see 2 or 3 FabFilter Pro Qs in series with some really careful notching of very specific harmonics. That's not weird. If you spend hours and hours doing this, it's like anything else in life. You just get better at it. So I encourage my method. Keep moving fast and just keep putting in the hours. I promise you will get there. Forcing your ears to be critical is what makes you a better mixer and a better engineer. And if you don't listen to other stuff, you're remaining in isolation.
Yeah, one thing I'd just like to expand on that there as well is that one thing that experienced producers understand, and I think less experienced producers take a while to really get, is that what your brain thinks is right and what actually is right is often 2 very different things. And so working on something in isolation for a long time, you'll sort of trick yourself into thinking that it sounds good and it sounds right and it sounds powerful. And I remember the first time that Alex showed me this, that you showed me this trick was when you were working on the first sample pack, I think. And yeah, it was really eye-opening because it was like, wow, okay, cool. This is just like it's almost like a foolproof way for you to not trick yourself, and it almost gives your brain like no chance to come up with some sort of sneaky idea going, yeah, this is right, and actually it's like, no, it's not right. Like, so just constantly having that repetition is so important, especially when you're sort of learning what, you know, sounds right in inverted commas, so to speak.
What you walk away with is your bass. You didn't just take it and walk. You actually tried to recreate it. I should just finish on saying that if you walk away from this process with one good bass, amazing. That's all you went in there for. I'm not saying you need to reference 3 tracks and walk away with 3 usable bass patches. You're just trying to walk away with 1. Okay, coming up next, folks, as promised, I catch up with an old buddy of mine, Vanna van Jaarsveld, aka Rinky Dink. Vanna, how are you? Where are you? Where are you right now?
Hey, what's up, Alex? I am now, I'm in Munich, waiting to catch a flight in the morning. My flight got screwed, so...
Sounds like a long day.
It was, and needlessly so, but...
Germany, I heard it's like 1,000,000 fucking degrees there.
It is. I mean, it was. It's nighttime now, but it was like 42 degrees yesterday or something in Hamburg.
I'm not all about that. It's same in London, man. I'm sweating right now.
Nice.
I'm just sitting
Good.
here. Yeah, I hope that's a nice visual. I'm just sitting here, just sweating, and it's just horrible. Even my computer's
it's
like
just horrible.
whining.
People are never happy with the weather there.
Yeah, but it's just that oppressive. It's not like that heat that in the evening then just kind of dissipates and you get a nice cool. It's just constant, like you're just waking up at 4 a.m. because you're so fucking hot.
No, stop whining.
Yeah, I picked it up from the Brits. But you're not here anymore. You're like off grid now.
Basically, yes.
What prompted that?
I could just get a really nice place to live for not a lot of money. But I'm not really in the middle of nowhere. I'm 20 kilometers away from the airport, my nearest airport where I fly from. So it's perfect. It's great.
It's the antithesis of Muswell Hill, basically, which is where me and Vanna met. Fucking how many years ago? I don't know, like
13 years ago. To the day, I don't know, but like something like that.
Chris from Flip Flop was like, we were chatting, we were nobodies, and he was like, yeah, Rinky Dink lives just up the hill, like in Muswell Hill. I was like, fuck off. So I just messaged you on the off chance, like, hey, you want to ride a track? And you're like, yeah, just come over. I was like, okay. And it was not a bad little number we put out.
The first one was we worked on 2 tracks, and the first one wasn't actually released. I'm sure I still have the files for it somewhere.
I just remember like Sauri making us noodles, and you were like, you spent a lot of the time. You were either sitting at Cubase because you were using Cubase then, or you were like pumping iron and sort of directing me.
Well, I don't know. That's like 13 years ago. I'm still not in shape, so.
So why are you in Germany?
I'm on my way to Brazil. I have a gig on Sunday afternoon, and the flight was leaving from Frankfurt, but I got a flight that went from where I live to Munich, and then from Munich to Frankfurt, which is a bit of a mission, but this way the booking class was better, so I would get many more miles for the journey, a lot more.
Foresight.
Yeah, I've just got to make Senator. I used to have a gold card on Aegean, which was easy to get, like Turkish.
Okay.
But the miles are not worth anything. I had like 250,000 miles, and I couldn't use them for any goods or upgrades. It was just fucking pathetic. So
is that lounge? Do you get lounge for that?
yeah, you get. I'm a frequent traveler back now on Miles and More. And I can go to a business lounge, which is a bit shit. It's not like the Senator lounge. But you can make a Senator with 100,000 miles on your account per year. And I missed it by like 10,000 miles last year.
Oh.
So you got to do another year,
So you're just back at 0. So, well, that's like...
It's not 0, it's frequent traveler. So you can go to the lounge. You can go to most German lounges.
Sure.
I mean, but yeah. I'm almost there now. That's why I'm doing the weird flights to build up more miles.
Can you see like the even better lounge from the lounge you're in? Is it
I used to be in the even better lounge because I had gold, which was Star Alliance gold, but not on Lufthansa. So I always went to that nice one. So it's like a kind of like a sobering experience to have to go to the shit lounge after years and years of using the nice lounge.
You're back to like silver or bronze.
Fuck.
Whatever. I remember airports for me before I started flying around doing gigs were like a romantic place. You know, like you'd see couples kissing and families reuniting, and you'd see like sports teams, like young kids traveling, and nothing takes the glamour away like fucking airports.
I was saying to people, I'm sure I've flown more than 2,000 flights or something, but I think it's more because I do more than 120 flights on Star Alliance a year, not including any of the other airlines. So it's been like that since 2003. So it's way more than 2,000, I think, by now.
Who's good? Who are you flying with? And you're like, yes, I'm fucking flying with them. Awesome.
It's all the same shit.
They've got like a terabyte of movies now. When you sit down, it's blowing my mind.
No, I don't generally watch too many movies. Maybe something new that I wanted to watch, and I'll sit down and watch it. But it's not a very nice. Even with the newer entertainment systems with much bigger screens, it's nice, but it's not great. I mean, I don't know. I'd rather just try and sleep a bit. Are you
still carting around that like? Do you remember that like hard shell suitcase you had with the?
Yeah, I've got a smaller one than the one you saw a long time ago, but I still got one. It sucks. I've got like calluses on my hands dragging the thing around. But anyway.
And it had the stickers all over it.
Yeah, I actually had stickers on the new one, but I sanded them off a year or two ago because I had to go through some through some gig in some airport where I wasn't meant to look like I was playing, so I actually removed them all.
I remember you told me once that I think you went to Boston, and
yes. No, I went to go play a gig in Boston, but I entered on a tourist visa, and they clocked me for coming to play, and they refused me entry, and I had to go all the way back. It really sucked.
Was it because of the stickers?
I don't know. I think so, probably, and also a very short turnaround time in the US was like a day or two, so they thought something was suspicious.
Okay.
And they were very enthusiastic. Like the Homeland Security has a training center in Boston, in that airport or outside the airport. So like all the fresh, bright, young recruits all, showing their stuff.
You can almost imagine him going like into the back room, like, guys, we got a good one here. Like, we got a sort of psytrance musician. And like, oh, this is gonna be juicy stuff. At least there's some consistency there. There's like a bottom threshold. I guess hotels is where it gets a bit more. You have no idea what you're walking into at all.
Yeah.
Because I heard a little story on the I'm still on the grapevine. Like I still hear stuff, and something about you getting locked out of your hotel room.
Oh, yeah, that was a while ago. I had a luggage cart in my room that they put my bags on in the lobby, and they wheeled it into my room. It was in Brazil somewhere.
Okay.
And I had a shower, and the trolley was in the way, so I took my bags off and I pushed it out into the corridor, and the door blew shut behind me, and I was naked. So
like not even a towel.
Nothing. No, towel would have helped. But I had to go down, and it was like on the 15th floor or something, and I had to get in the lift. Thank God there was nobody in the lift or came in, and I had to go into the reception holding my dick, And they understood pretty quickly what had happened. But that was pretty embarrassing.
Like beckoning frantically from the lift, or did you just cruise?
I tried to be as casual as possible.
I guess in that situation, you just got to own it, right? You just got to be like, this is happening. There's no
It's
way this
happening.
isn't
Yeah,
happening.
just go with it. I was pretty red though.
I
I mean, on my face.
yeah. Jesus. I just want to say that so we hung out way too briefly at Noisely, and I really loved your set.
Yes.
I really loved your set.
Thank you. I was sad to go. I could really have stayed another day, another night, and be staying in a teepee. And just, wow, that was so nice. I don't know, actually, there's not a lot of parties I go to where everyone speaks English as a first language. So just to be able to understand the banter and the silliness, it was great. It was super nice.
It's funny that you say that, because actually, so when I was doing my From Memory stuff before I started working with Joe, I was just flying around on my own, kind of like you mostly do. And it was before I knew anyone and before I was playing gigs with anyone. So I was just,
When you still had dreadlocks.
Still had little dreadlocks, the whole thing. And I was doing lots of like the Euro gigs, where we all sort of cut our teeth. And that was the biggest struggle for me, was that just that's the part you're not prepared for. You're not prepared for that you're going to get dropped off at a place and no one speaks the language, and the promoter's not going to look after you all night, so you just stand there. Right?
That's where drugs come in.
I mean, there's so many ways to get out of that situation, but yeah, dude, I loved your set. I every time I hear you play, you seem to have completely changed your sound and not lost your signature at all, and I know a lot of artists respect that about you.
Oh, thanks. That's sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I've got a lot of new music. It's just nothing. I was working really hard on a compilation with Marco Element that was meant to come out on FM on Future Music really soon, but I've just shelved the whole thing.
Why?
Because I couldn't finish. I had all these tracks, and I don't know, it was like 80% there, but the kicks and basses sucked, and so I'm just going to start releasing singles again.
Sure.
What's that?
Something's beeping.
Yeah, I hear it.
I assumed it was you.
It's this feeling of urgency.
Is it getting faster?
Yeah.
I think
Not me. It's not my side. It's your side, bro.
It's definitely getting louder.
Oh wait, it's the phone here. Sorry, wait. Sorry. Yeah, it was another phone.
That's kind of like a running joke that we have, is just you're putting out great stuff, and it's always like, yeah, but the kick and bass is just and every time I talk to you about kick and bass, you're like, the first thing I need to tell you, Alex, is that ignore everything I last told you about kick and bass, because I was just totally wrong about it.
I was totally wrong, man. I don't know, like such, I can fuck up kicks and basses in any way. It's just infinite ways of fucking it up. But recently, Gaudium, who I made a remix for, I spent some time with him, and I realized what I was doing was completely wrong and had been wrong for years. So
literally everyone listening right now is like, what was the thing? What did he show you?
Well, I don't know. I was working really hard. I had up until the point now, or a few months ago, I had like a sub level. I had a sub level on a sub layer on the kick. I mean, on the bass.
Yeah.
Sub layer, and then a sort of middle layer, and then a click, and sometimes just the click in the middle, the click in the sub.
Sure.
And I would move those two around. I would fuck with the phases. I would change the envelope of them. And yeah, I mean, I was trying to do something in my mind, but yeah, it didn't sound right at all. And then just being too brutal. I mean, I didn't have an RME Digicheck until, like, I don't know, very recently, a year ago, 2 years ago, something like this. And I had no idea from looking at the various VUs on the software what actually I should be doing. And Bonin, X-Noise, he told me like a few years ago that I'm cutting where I should be boosting and boosting where I should be cutting. I had no fucking clue at all. So yeah, I don't know.
What did Gaudium show you?
Gaudium, his kick and bass is really simple. I mean, the kicks that he's got are nice, and then the bass is just an impulse that he samples mostly from his analog gear, and then drops that into a sampler, fucks with it a little bit in the sampler, and then uses some plugins on top of that to change the character slightly, but it's one layer. And I mean, we used to use Cubase, and we used to use VB1 and then drop Quadra fuzz on it and EQ it, and we used to be done.
Worked
that was
every
great.
time.
Used to sound
Every time.
fantastic. But then a few years ago, I stopped using Cubase. So I didn't have all those things that I'd always used, and I got a bit lost, I think. And also, 5-6 years ago, when the prog guys started using a bit crush layer on top of the bass, that made a big impact on me, because it was definitely noticeable when I was DJing those tracks.
So present.
And then Avi Rum's work, Vinny Visi Avi Rum, when he started the Vinny Visi project, before it exploded with tracks like The Tribe, he was experimenting with a bit crush layer, which was crazy in those old tracks. If you hear the original version of Expender, which was one of the first tracks that DJ started playing around 2013, I think, it was really, really in your face. It sounds crazy even today.
Yeah, it's just a wall.
Yeah. So that affected me a lot, and I didn't want to go back to the sound that I knew. So I just got a bit lost.
I think that's your artistry though. Like that's like you're always kind of like seem slightly discontent, and like you're chasing something. And I think that lack of complacency is that's to me is that's Rinkadink. You know, like always like this like harebrained idea. Like no, what I'm chasing is even better. And that's I hear that. I think that's your signature. That's what makes you so great.
But let's see, I feel inspired again. I'm going to get tracks releasing and coming out with some regularity, which also I needed to do because I haven't done for a whole year.
Great.
I haven't released a single track, I think. I mean, you've got to. There's a lot of releases that people put out that I listen to on a daily basis that, to me, has no consequence. I mean, it's a track that's been made and it sounds good, it's produced well, and it's good for the dance floor, but it's just so fucking boring. It has no. It's the same as the last 10 tracks that maybe that crew have released, and it's the same kick and bass, which works really well. And I don't know, it's just like fuck, do we have to go through this because it's fucking boring?
I feel you 100%, and again, just bringing it back to you, I think it's that pursuit of something that's not currently happening is what makes music exciting, It's that idea, it's that fucking idea you have that like, it's not quite right because this thing that you have to prove, it's like an axe that you have to grind. And when you hear really generic music, it's like there was no axe. There was no struggle. There was a struggle to get the production right. The production's amazing when you hear that stuff. You're just sitting there like, how are they doing? But the music, if it doesn't move you, it doesn't matter. So there's new music coming up from you this year.
Oh God!
And so that's a promise that you just made to the world.
Promise. It's all ready. It's all a single on Future Music will come out really soon from some of the tracks that I have ready. No, I made a remix of To Another Dimension.
Okay.
From Gaudium, and another old remix from another track that I used to They're both tracks I used to DJ a lot. So tracks that I played tons. I just wanted to sort of refresh so I could carry on playing them.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Vanna, thanks so much for joining us on our first ever Futurephonic podcast.
I didn't know it was the first one.
Yeah, it's the first one. This is it.
I would have plugged in the mic.
What, you're just sitting there with like a
No.
really nice mic the whole time?
No, actually, I lost the adapter, the lightning to mini jack adapter on my phone, and I refused to buy a new one because I've gone through like 3 of them. So, it's just out of order now. I'll wait for the new phone.
It adds to the character of your story. I feel the hotel in your voice right now.
It's such a shit hotel room. It sucks. It's out of the 80s.
Jesus Christ. Dude, have a great... I hope this trip picks up for you. I know
It's going to
will.
be great. It's going to be great. I'm going back down to the bar. I'm going to get another beer.
Have a great night, man. Speak to you soon.
You too, bro. Speak soon.
So we did say we'd be doing a free giveaway of a plugin today, and that will be to the person whose call we play next. But before we do that, I want to head in, check it out, show you guys how cool it is. So we're so happy to be giving away 1 copy of the MGranular MB from Melda. It's a multi-band granular resynthesizer. Like all the Melda stuff I've seen so far, it's incredibly deep. Like, there's so much going on here, so many options. It's incredibly complex, but it's got this sort of quick edit mode, so it puts the most, I could say, it puts all the fun stuff up front. So you can either quickly flick through presets, play with the grain size and the copies, that's what I'll be showing you today, or you can go into this sort of pro mode, which, to be honest, I think would be more suitable for like a professional Hollywood special effects and sound designer. But when you're probably in your musical flow, you're probably gonna want to be flicking through presets and just playing with the fun stuff straight up. So granular synthesis is when you take a sound and you split it up into thousands of little particles or grains, if you will, granular, and you put it back together again. So here's a sample from Future Geometrics. So I'm just going to put the granular plugin on it. And so I'm just literally going through the presets here and playing with the big knobs it puts up front is the grain size and the knob called copies. Just playing with the grain size there. So it's turning the sound into a completely different but also extremely usable sound. The music producer and podcast maker in me is absolutely loving this, and the commercial sample pack maker inside me is a little bit scared that you're all just going to get this plugin, put it on all your stuff, and no one's going to buy my sample pack anymore. So let's keep going here. I'm just going to keep playing with this grain size. It's just... Ooh. So let's bring in another sample from Future Geometrics.
Look into the mirror. What do you see?
This seems like the kind of plugin that you want to put on nice long sounds. So let's time stretch it. So it's got loads of audio to work with, and voice samples generally sound cool when they've been time stretched. So this is just Cubase time stretch.
Look into the mirror.
And let's just put on the granular. I'm just going to go from the first preset.
Look into the mirror. What do you see?
Yes! Alright, this is the power chords.
Look into the mirror. What do you see?
This is the one thing which also really hits me with this plugin is that the width control keeps stuff really nicely sort of in phase. I'm looking at the goniometer on my Army Digicheck, and its mono compatibility is good. I'd say it's got a very healthy amount of stereo width, which sounds good. I don't hear any phasiness.
Into the mirror. What do you see?
Could play with a random pitch. Let's check out this transformator. That sounds a bit trancy, doesn't it?
Look into the mirror.
And you can hear when I put the width up, it's a really nice spread.
Look into the mirror. What do you see? Look into the mirror.
So what I'm really seeing here is a really great high quality plugin. I do find with plugins like this, like for instance, the Waves Morphoder or other vocoders, there can be potential to kind of get a lot of harshness out, but everything here just sounds so smooth. I'm struggling to make it sound bad. So it's perfect for psytrance producers, and then if you want to get super deep, it'd be perfect for professional sound effects designers. It's just a lot of fun. It's so deep, it's like having a mini Cubase within Cubase, and it's got GPU acceleration for the plugin. So it's like a computer game in that sense. So to the guys at Melda, wow, what an incredibly deep plugin, speaking honestly here, and you'll definitely be hearing it in my work soon.
Hey guys, this is Aaron from Melbourne. I'm just wondering how you guys do your processes in relation to working on music before you sort of start a project and the processes involved. Also, what's the difference between when you approach sound design for your sample libraries rather than when you're writing music? I hope that makes sense. Thank you. See ya.
At first, when I started making samples, sample packs, I initially found it easier because without the narrative of a whole track, I felt like I was making sounds in isolation and left the challenge of how to use it up to the producer, which is all well and good. It just takes so much longer because I found in my personal experience when I've been writing a track and then we get to the sound design, we need a one shot, we need a lead, we need XYZ sound. It takes a while. It can take hours and hours to actually come up with like a gem sound, to come up with that one sound that just sounds awesome. Because I'm more focused on arrangement, stuff like that, or mixing. If I'm offering 50 samples in, say, one folder, it's like the best sound from 50 different tracks. And that takes forever. It takes me generally about 3 to 4 hours to make one sound or to make one serum patch. I'm writing a serum bank at the moment. Yesterday, I made 3 sounds. And I started at 8:30 a.m. and went on to about 7 p.m. I made 3 sounds. That's what I walked away from that with. So earlier in the show, I was talking about intent, and in terms of how I feel, what I'm thinking going into this process, intention is important. I try to not be completely random. So sometimes I'll sit down and I've got no idea what I'm going to make, and I just start twiddling knobs and just seeing what happens. And that can be a great way of doing it. But I try to have a sense of intent. I when I sit down and I make a sample or a synth patch, I want to get inspired first. I don't want to just cruise on autopilot. I want to connect with my imagination, my inspiration, and increasingly, as we have a wider audience and a more vocal audience, I put out posts. What do you guys want to see? I'm getting more and more answers. So now when I sit down, I think, okay, well, a lot of people want sequence sounds. A lot of people want pads. So I kind of know. I guess you could say I'm making for an audience now. So. But if I had to use one word to sum it up, would be, once again, intention. If I sit down to make a really nice drifty pad, and if I don't make that pad, why not? Was it difficult? Was it a challenge? If so, I will keep going until I do that. So I want to be able to make any sound that I want. If I sit down with the intention of making something and I can't make it, I'll just spend the amount of time needed to make that sound. One thing that is key for me when I'm making samples is that I always build them into current psytrance tracks. So we're on Beatport, we've got an account, I download everything in WAV. I want to know what's shit hot right now, and I will find the emptier sections in those tracks and write leads into them, because it's easier to make something which has no context than making a synth patch which actually sounds good when in contemporary stuff. That's what I'm offering our customers, is something which actually works in contemporary psytrance.
I think the point about context is really important. I mean, it's like, you know, if you're a company or you're designing a bunch of patches for your synth, right, and people are going to be demoing your patches, and you press a button and it just sounds incredible. It's like, wow, that sound is awesome. Like that's what you want as a synth manufacturer, as a sound designer, because people are going to want to buy it. They're going to want to use the stuff. They're going to tell their mates about it, like all those sorts of things. Like a really good example is Omnisphere, for example. But when you're sort of building sounds or designing sounds for a track, it's like it has to all work in context. And often if you get like the stems from an artist for like a remix and you sort of soloed each one of those sounds by themselves, the sounds don't really sound that amazing. I mean, they sound good and they work in context of the track, but it's a very different thing. Like often if you think about, let's say you're making a snare, for example, and you just need like that tiny extra little bit of crunch on top, or you're making a kick and you just need a tiny little bit of extra pop, or you need some sort of distortion layer on a lead or something, like that actual sound that you're making, if you were to like demo that to someone, they'd be like, why would I want that sound? It's like a p, or like a t, like it's you're not gonna sort of sell someone that sound. So it's really all about the context. And I think the thing that I've definitely seen in the sample pack stuff that we make is that it's like, you want the sounds to be as usable as possible from the get-go. So it's sort of this balance between, I want to make it sound super awesome on its own merit, but also it needs to be usable. And I think to go back to the example of Omnisphere, it's like, for those of you that have Omnisphere, it's like you press a button on Omnisphere and some of the patches, it's literally like an entire track comes out. But to make that usable, you've often got to go through and take off things, especially like reverbs, any sort of spatial effects, to fit it into your track. And you're going to almost sort of like make the sound less good or like less pleasing if you want isolation. To the ear. Yeah, in isolation for it to work in your track. So, I mean, I know that different artists have different approaches to this, and I wouldn't really say that there's one particular right way, but I'd say that the key thing is just to be conscious of like, what are you making this sound for? Like, what role does it need to play? And if you think of it like a film, for example, like if you've already got a bunch of main characters in a film, you're going to be adding sort of extras to back those characters up, or sort of props to make the scene better. If you go and add a whole nother character in, it's gonna mess up the flow. Like things aren't really going to work. So I would say like the main difference is context and sort of intention. Like, what am I trying to achieve with this sound, and sort of does it tick those boxes?
Every sound can't be every sound can't be massive, but you really touched on the quandary of the sound designer, the commercial sound designer. I want everything to sound massive. I want everything to sound huge, but in reality, the actual elements of that we use to make stuff like, for instance, psychedelic trance, when you don't walk away with like 100 massive sounds. So this is actually where I've started now offering wet and dry versions of sounds. So you'll have, 8 bars of sound with delay, because it just sounds great. It just sounds so nice. And then you have 8 bars dry. And in some cases, I'll then put another 8 bars, which I've broken that sound into its different layers. I do that sometimes. I want to do it more. It's also the quandary when I'm making synth patches. You know, when I go through other people's synth banks, I can tell that a lot of these sounds worked really well when the person who made the patch was making it. But I can't figure out how to use it. But that's not a good enough reason to not give you that preset. So that's actually why I included the 70-minute video with infinite structures, is so I could be like, little tip, here's a good way to make this sound good.
Usable as well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of the, you know, like for instance, some of the spectral sounds that you get with Serum, they sound good in lower octaves. They sound absolutely shit in high octaves. Kind of need to leave you to figure that bit out, but I do want help when I can.
Yeah, that was an awesome question, Aaron. I think it raised a lot of really interesting points. We're really happy to give you the Melda Granular multi-band plugin. You'll be hearing from us shortly with the details on how to get that.
Hey guys, just a quick question. What inspired you guys to start Futurephonic? And was there anything in particular that you saw with young producers, what they was doing wrong or anything like that? Also, what can we expect in the future in terms of teaching? I know you have your master classes, but have you got anything in the pipelines that kind of take it to the next step going forward to obviously bring education to more people? Podcast, brilliant idea. Love your work. Well done, guys.
So I just left Sonic Species to Joe, and I was teaching, and I was working in a pub, and I was teaching 1-to-1, but I'd always wanted to collaborate, work with someone else. I was working with Sam, who was actually my manager at the pub. Yeah, it was quite interesting when we were sort of standing at the bar and, you know, talking about music production and this whole new venture that we were taking on, and you'd be like, by the way, probably going to go ahead and ask you to finish eating your lunch downstairs. And probably don't take too long either, because we've got a lot of customers to serve. Yeah, we'll finish the chat about the music production later. And you were also teaching.
That's right, yeah.
And I was just like, hey, like, do you want to just team up somehow? And that's when you were like, masterclass.
That's right.
And that had never happened before in the psytrance world, and it got us thinking that there's lots of stuff on YouTube, as we all know, but what about hitting the scene with the authority of people who had actually become friends of mine, people like Tristan and Nate and Dixter? Let's go to them and say, okay, you show us how you do it. And that was the inspiration for getting Futurephonic, for reaching out to bigger artists.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was good because we started doing the initial online classes, like the live sort of seminar things, which, you know, we struggled with some technology issues at times. We were using this thing called Google Hangouts. And yeah, when it worked, it was awesome. We definitely had some struggles with that, but we finished doing those classes and we had such a good response from people, and people kept asking us if we were going to do more and if they could see the ones that they weren't able to take part in. And that kind of led us on to make essentially, the complete edition Masterclass 1, the complete edition Masterclass 2, which was sort of big amalgamations of all of those things.
Yeah.
And then we sort of took on the format from there and moved on. And it was a really good decision because we could sort of give a lot more people the things that we were able to offer just a few in the past, which was, I think, a really good decision for us and obviously for the rest of the community. Yeah,
and the whole podcast thing is like, for years I didn't even know what a podcast was.
Yeah, right.
And I had no idea. I didn't get why people were so gotten such a big thing about them. And then I started listening to podcasts, and I actually realized it's great to turn off the screen sometimes and just listen. So that was our intention with the podcast. To answer your question, is just have an hour of us answering your calls and your advice.
Absolutely, yeah. Bring it, and also just for you guys to get to know us a bit better, and for us to get to know you a bit better. I mean, it's one thing, being a sort of customer, provider relationship, but just getting to know you guys a bit better.
And I think there are lots of things that you have to learn on your own. You know, stuff like your whole artistry is built on things which you develop, ideas which you develop on your own. But there are, especially with the genre like psytrance, where within its subgenres, there is a sound that most people are going for. And when you have something bordering on objective like that, if someone just comes in and says, kick and bass, look at matching the fades of those. Or, snares just generally don't have too much in the low end. Stuff, if people just give you quick tips like that, it can save you years and actually leave you to focus on the things which only you can learn on your own.
Exactly. And I think, I speak for both of us here, but I think I'd be fair in saying that because we'd both had, by that point, we'd had a fair bit of teaching experience. It was, for myself, I saw that in my own personal journey, putting in those hard hours of kind of just like stabbing in the dark and not really knowing what I was doing and going through that whole painful process and then sort of coming back around and being like, okay, cool. So now I can teach people and now I can give them the things that they want. I was like, well, Alex has these contacts, you have these people, you have this wealth of knowledge. So it's like, let's cut that out for other people, so that they don't have to go through that process that sort of we had to go through, at least not as much. Absolutely.
And I think me and Sam just both get a real kick out of teaching.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's just it's in my blood, actually. Both my parents were teachers, and I just love teaching. I love passing on information. I love condensing and interpreting information and offering that to you.
Sometimes I enjoy teaching more than making music, actually, especially when you might be stuck on a track or something, and then you just like have a really good session with a student and you just see that little spark in their eye when they got something. I was like, yes, it was awesome.
And I think that's a great note to leave it on. I've had so much fun doing our first podcast.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I can't wait to see what the next one brings.
So guys, keep your calls coming in. All you have to do, pick up your mobile phone, your cellular phone, find us on Facebook Messenger, our Futurephonic page, and just hold down that little microphone, leave us a message. All your calls have been great today, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Yeah, and not to mention a big thanks to Melda for giving us a copy of their multi-band granular plugin, and Aaron, well done for winning that. So yeah, guys, excited to see what you've got for the next one, and we'll see you next time.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Do you want to make us happy? Like, really happy? Of course you do. Well, we want the whole world to know that we're doing an awesome new podcast. So get out there, tell your friends, tell your parents, tell your colleagues, shout it from the rooftops. Let the world around you know we're doing a new thing. We would be so happy if you could share on your Facebook and all your social media and just let the world know so that more people listen.